one of my grounding elements of my life has been around following my curiosity and following my passion and following profound desire to make a difference. We ourselves have personally experienced lack of justice, have experienced inequity, have experienced in our families of origin. Journey to heal that trauma can lead us in this exploration of healing and creating thriving livelihoods and creating and seeking community.
What can you tell us from your journey about finding that balance of being, following spirit and being true to yourself, but also having a work in life that is meaningful and that is able to support you? Hello. Greetings. Dr. Diane J. Johnson, yes. We're so grateful to have you, and thank you. We just had a beautiful opportunity to have you lead us in a prayer and ground us in, and thank you for that. And it actually felt like a perfect way to introduce you. We were in our conversation just talking about following the flow and trusting where, spirit guides you, where the divine guides you. And so your path, often you start with a bio and your path has really just been that, following spirit. And there's so many beautiful things you've done. And the through line that I see is just being a force of transformation. A force of transformation moving us towards connection, towards equity, towards healing, regenerative. So I'm so grateful to have you. We're going to learn so much from you today. And, in addition to the work you've done as an author, as a consultant, is there anything you'd love for us to know about you, where you come from and who you come from, that just can let people get to know you a little bit?
It's almost like that question when you're doing an icebreaker, like what are three things that you want to let people know that they would not know
if we really knew you.
Yes, if we really knew you, exactly. And I think if you really knew me, you would understand that I have been a lifelong nonconformist. And that accepting and reveling in my staunch commitment to following my curiosity, right? And how important it is. I think when I think about one of my grounding elements of my life has been around following my curiosity and following my passion and following a profound desire to make a difference. Right? And it is not an accident that many of us are on this path around facilitating and catalyzing transformation, because we ourselves have personally experienced lack of justice, have experienced inequity, have experienced in our families of origin a sense, not even a sense, but lived experience around injustice and lived experience around not being seen and being ignored, that creates a tremendous amount of trauma, but the journey to heal that trauma can lead us in this exploration of healing and creating thriving livelihoods and creating and seeking community. Right? If we think about the people that are profoundly adept at transformation, it comes from their personal and spiritual commitment to making things right. Right? And how do we do that at our interpersonal level, at our personal level, at our professional level, at our community level, right? And so that journey that is informed by spirit is also related. Like when I think about my journey and why I feel like I have been led by spirit, is because of my deep desire to make things right, right? So that's a lot. That was a long-winded.
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Perfect.
Oh, and the other thing is that I am an identical twin, which is very, very interesting, which I think definitely has created my commitment to really be my authentic self, because there was another person who looks exactly like me and where we do similar work, which is a really fascinating thing. So any number of times, my sister Angela will be at a conference and someone will come running up to her and she goes, "Oh no, you think that I'm not who I think I am," right? And the same thing with me. So, after decades of on the planet, we recognize that confused look when someone is looking straight at us and going, like, "Why don't you recognize me?" It's like, because I'm not who you think I am. So it makes it fun. Wow. Yeah. And I think it's not an accident that both of us do transformation work because of the family, because of our family of origin.
So many people I know are trying to find themselves or struggling to find themselves, and we're in this capitalist system, and people are trying to find that work of being myself, but also having right vocation, right? Mm-hmm. People call it dharma. So what can you tell us from your journey about finding that balance of being, following spirit and being true to yourself, but also having a work in life that is meaningful and that is able to support you?
I would say thriving. Like how do we create a thriving professional life? And so one of my core anchors is around being on purpose, right? That we purposefully and intentionally are seeking and then finding and embodying our purpose. Like, why are we here, right? And so this journey around how do we find like why are we? I'm going to interrupt myself. So I've been blessed enough to have been mentored and worked with Joanna Macy, and Joanna talks about, the notion that we have all decided to be here at this time to create and contribute to the world and the culture now, right? That there's the array of spiritual traditions that believe in that. And my journey, so one of the if you were to add the other title, is that I'm Reverend Dr. Diane Johnson, and that is because after spending 20 years in doing organizational transformation, organizational culture work, strategy across multiple sectors, at one point my work life was over here, and my spiritual life was over here. My spiritual life was like, about this big, and I was really about like having impact in various, whether it was like, in the not-for-profit. Well, first it was in the corporate communication sector. That was soul sucking, so left that after 5 years. Then like, so what do you do? And marketing and writing and promotion. Oh, you can do fundraising and development. But we're raising money to change the world. But why? With what strategies? So fast forward, and at one point started, and during that time was like, oh, okay, so I'm a Black woman from the West Coast, almost converted to Judaism when I was entering college. Then didn't do that, but consider myself culturally Jewish. Then, get exposed to Buddhism, start meditating, contemplative practice. Oh, like, look at this amazing tradition. So, and as my spiritual life got larger and larger, like exposure to traditional West African spiritual traditions and Yoruba, and the Orishas, then became, a pagan, right? Was like a Black bohemian, woo-woo, and so as my relationship with divine kept on getting larger and larger, I had my work life over here, my spiritual life over there, and that I couldn't do that anymore. So started integrating that, and literally had a mystical experience that said, go to seminary. I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to seminary. And so was in search, and that was a decision that was informed by, I can be a better change agent by supporting and understanding the Judeo-Christian practices because I knew almost everything. I mean, I was raised by an atheist and an agnostic, so I didn't have to deconstruct my understanding of what Christianity was, because I was like, well, I was told that it was a bunch of stories that help make the world go around, but that it's a belief system that can be interrogated, right? So this consistent following of my and developing my relationship with the divine helped me understand that it is spirit, it is our souls that that we are in contract with to find our purpose and then to be on purpose, right? And so, and this is why doing our internal work, or whether it's our interpersonal healing work, and our relationship with something that is greater than us, needs to connect, and like is the instrument that helps us find our purpose, right? So discovering and articulating what embodied practices, what spiritual practices, what spiritual traditions can anchor us and ground us in our work, in our life's work, right? And I think this notion of that somehow there is separation between our purpose in the world and contributing and thriving and loving, that is connected to spirit, right? And how important it is that we have ongoing practices that evolve, change, morph, but that anchor us in who we are and how we love ourselves and how we love the world is super, super important. And when we do that, and when we become closer to that, I would say that it is that quote unquote accidents. I kind of believe in accidents, but things will start flowing. Like the whole notion of synchronicity and all these theories about, we are, that there is something larger than us that is helping us. I think it's true, right?
What I love about what you're sharing now and we're talking about earlier is, I think a lot of the times people are looking for purpose from the same place that we're looking for, mental health or whatever, so to make me feel better, right? And you're talking about being driven by this desire to be of service, to do good, and just talking about how that ends up guiding you, whether it's the higher power or this higher meaning that is guiding us. So I love that. And it's
right. Because I think it's very, very important that we recognize the levels that we are existing in, right? So the how we view our professional lives, right, as if it's a transactional series of elements, right? I would say that and almost the notion of that you find a skill and that you work that, and and then this extractive capitalism, which is about you have to acquire. That is profoundly flawed, right? And so our challenge is, how do we have what I would call a radical self-assessment of and a level of authentic inquiry into who we are, right? And therefore in discovering and identifying and continuing to evolve who we are, that helps us then figure out what our purpose is, and that purpose changes over time, right? That then supports us creating right livelihood, right? And I don't think it's an accident that the people who do that successfully also have a deep spiritual life.
I love what you said there about finding right livelihood. And what comes to mind is that we're in these times that are so wild, and even if you find that purpose, at least for me in my journey, it's like, how do you stay on that path? And like, it's such a winding road to like try to navigate. And, you know, we've talked about this a lot before, but the importance of eldership, the importance of community. So, you know, we met in a professional context, but very beautifully our relationship came to like, wow, I'm getting mentored and you're just asking me how I'm doing. And there's a difference between elders and older. So I'd just love to hear from you, like in these times where we don't have the lineages maybe that we came from and our cultural contexts have kind of been broken apart. What is the power that eldership has played in your life? You mentioned Joanna Macy, and then what has called you to offer that to others in community?
That's a great question. Although it's interesting, what's coming up for me is what grounds me in my capacity to be an elder, which I was in denial for a very long time. It's like, elder, I'm not an elder. We're like, what's the age? When is it? And I think that's also a reaction to the level of cultural ageism, right? That is such a warped part of at least dominant U.S. culture, I think white culture. But I think about my relationship to my ancestors. So because of one of the spiritual traditions that I practice, how important my relationship with the legacy and with my ancestors. So because I have an ongoing practice, so I mean, I have an ancestors altar in my home that has, you know, my lineage of my blood, you know, my blood family, but then my other elders and mentors that are not of blood, and you know, so, and the fact that that is real, that doesn't happen just on, you know, Halloween and Samhain or Day of the Dead, but that it's an ongoing practice, I think is helpful in my understanding how important that it's now time for me to mentor folks who are younger or at different stages of finding different stages of their journey, right? And the recognition that I have an accumulation of experience and perspective that's important to share, and I think it's so, for me, it comes from a sense of how important it is to be generous and to lead with love, you know, and that's directly from my mother and my mother's family, where there was such a level of love and generosity. So that, I mean, that's who I am as a person. So so I think I've always been at all the various stages of my journey that I have been around sharing, right? And there's also part about who I am professionally is always about creating connections, supporting networks, you know, so for me, it's both a personal as well as a professional commitment that I have. And so I think, because if we were to think about the individuals who support and nurture us, it's always comes from a place of love, right? It's not a transaction. And for me, it also comes from my listening to, like, so I really believe in the power of embodiment and the power of body knowledge and somatics. And so there are times like when I met you, there's you know, or when I've met Nathaniel, like all the people, the younger people who I adore and love in my life, it's because I listen to my body and it is a yes, right? So when I hear a yes, it's like, well, how can I help you? How can I support you? How can, you know? So I think there's, and that is, I would say, a bit of revolutionary, because so often in our dominant culture that is around scarcity and holding, you know, the holding resources and holding information and holding relationships tightly, right? Because if I'm in competition with you, if I'm competing against a consulting contract or competing against this RFP or competing against this VC, this notion about that there's just profound scarcity and so I can't share, in contrast to I remember when I first learned about the vagus nerve, right? And where compassion actually lives in our brain, right? So that it is actually a natural thing for us to collaborate and be generous. So how important it is, regardless of where we are in our journeys, that how we get to practice the radical notion of generosity and connection and collaboration. So one of the communities that I've been a part of for over 10 years is Opportunity Collaboration, which is an international development, network or whatever. And very early on, it had challenging beginnings, but earlier on, we started talking about where the tagline is, how can I help you? What can I do for you? And not out of a sense of, I would say, colonialist virtue signaling, but like this authentic, we are all here as change makers who want to change the world. And so how can I help you? And that was really radical because in the world of international development, which is so informed by colonialism. So we could have a whole other podcast about the necessity to have a systems analysis, to have a power analysis, to have an analysis around race and class and gender and et cetera. But the radical idea that when we support and nurture each other, and especially when we support and nurture people of color and people who have been historically and traditionally marginalized, that when we recognize how essential that is, that then we all, like everyone is lifted up. And so this notion of eldering comes from a sense of generosity and how it is so important that we share experience, share knowledge from a standpoint, not of like, well, I'm going to tell you how it is, right. That condescending thing, that is annoying as, but that comes from, I'm just going to, from a generous sharing. I want to share with you and have you talk to so-and-so and have you, so I think, and it's important to seek out folks, almost in a sense, regardless of age or where they are in their journey, but it is about seeking out those where there is a sense of kinship, right? And that kinship is not based on social identity, but that kinship is based on values and creating a collective vision for the world that we want to live in.
Speaking of things that are important for us in these times, eldership and community, another topic that has been really on our minds recently has been rites of passage and initiation. It seems like we have so many uninitiated people in leadership, people who have not really fully become adults and stepped into maturity, but they're in power or they're in positions of eldership. So I just love to hear from your journey. What has rites of passage meant for you? Has that been a part of your journey? And what power do you think that it holds for us in these times?
So I think the lack of adequate and appropriate rites of passage has to do with the pathologies of culture that we find ourselves in, right? Because if we look historically, especially in various communities, I'm thinking specifically in communities of color, where there has been the entryway into rites of passage, whether it's a quinceañera, or in the Jewish community and a bat mitzvah, So I think that the lack of being held, being held by a community and being held by a community that has rituals that helps us mark the various stages of our lives. Like that, that lack is I think supports this floundering and this like wondering like where, how do I get grounded? How do I know that I'm going from one particular stage of my journey to the next? So I think I think that void is answered when we are in community. Because if we think about, like I'm thinking about my experience, where my membership in various communities, that community creates a container for rites. So, for instance, I'm a member of a pagan community where for the last 20 years there's been a rite of passage ritual for folks in their teens, and it's a naming ritual that's and it's out of a neo-pagan tradition, but it is so powerful, right? Or if we look in more traditional settings, and it's no surprise that many of those communities are actual spiritual communities, right? But that, and I think as we get older, that seeking for, so where are the times where I can acknowledge evolution, where I can acknowledge the journey of where we are. And so I think that there's something in our seeking around what also assists in that, like I said, that radical self-assessment and that discernment about where we are, what cycle we are. So that's again a long-winded answer where if there's a reason why people are, I think, consistently searching for that, and very often those rites of passages are in our spiritual communities, and even in our communities of family. Like, if you think about, when people turn 50, when people turn 40, when people turn 50, when people turn 60, that acknowledgement of our passage in from one decade into another is really, really important. And I would say that those are very, if someone asked me, oh, so what's one of the most simplest but maybe effective rites of passage that we can do, I would say it is acknowledging when we go in from one decade to the next. And how often it's like, yeah, I don't want to do a birthday party. It's like, well, why wouldn't you? It's like this gorgeous opportunity to reflect on where you've been and where you're going. I mean, in one of my communities, we do this when people have whether it's even a major birthday or not, we have what we call the birthday questions. And you gather your friends, you gather your family, and it's not just a party, but you very intentionally ask, like, so what are the highlights of your year? What are the highlights of your decade? What are your highlights professionally, physically, spiritually, professionally? Right? So because it's the power of affirming, like acknowledging and affirming the journey that we're on. Because I think what happens in our current culture is that we are so busy, acquire, do, transaction, profoundly committed to social media. Don't get me started. That doesn't give us the time and space to acknowledge our journey, right? And what's that like, and how that is a testament of affirmation in a really important way.
I know a big part of the work that you do is helping to heal these cultural wounds, these divisions, racism and sexism, and one way is bridging. Dr. John Powell talks about bridging and bonding, right? So in your experience in this work, what's the power of affinity spaces, where it's like, this is a space just for people of this identity to be together and enter into this healing before we go and do the bridging work?
Yes. I've been facilitating affinity spaces for, like 30 years, right? And I have to laugh because there is still the argument about, well, affinity spaces are exclusive, right? And that they're damaging because they separate us. Right? And I just have to do a heavy sigh. And I used to be really, really angry. Now I just, okay, so let me explain. And the awareness that we have about structural racism, right? And the ability for us to acknowledge that this is not a figment of our imagination, that there is an ongoing, very, very, very specific, rigid system that has been around separating us.
We're already separated.
Yes. So the need for affinity spaces, and I talk about this a lot, that there is a dominant culture that has power and that privileges particular social identities. And so and the affinity spaces are so critical and essential for those of us who live in who have social identities that are explicitly targeted, that has created wounds and trauma. The need for us to be together to help heal that can I will say only happen in the affinity space, right? And that it is not exclusionary. And that it is part of a process. It is not a transactional one-off or a series of one-offs, but that we need that both folks who are of particular social identities, whether they be those who are targeted or those that are doing the targeting. Like, this is why, luckily for the last 20 years, we have more and more people working with white people, working with them, having to heal this notion about whiteness, right? So I would say it is, and there's also a whole array of fragility of the dominant culture, right? And we have to avoid people feeling uncomfortable. Well, guess what? It's like, what's that bumper sticker? If you're not feeling uncomfortable, you're not doing the work, right? So this and this, the importance of what is happening to us at an individual level, at a personal level, what is happening to us, in our workplaces, in our community, etc. So that there is a relationship between what you have experienced personally and interpersonally that is helped when you come into an affinity space. So you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to do code switching. Right? If you don't know what code switching is, look it up. But how important it is that affinity spaces get created as part of the process that then creates the capacity for us to do bridging, right? So it is the both and, in contrast to either or, because our ability to create inclusive, dynamic, thriving communities rests on our ability to do some of the healing work that we do individually, and then the healing work that we do collectively. And how important it is that our healing is in service. It's not just healing so that we feel better, right? Because that's a whole other piece about, how people are, what I will say, do spiritual bypass. Right. And they want to meditate themselves so they feel better. It's like, it is about how is our healing in service to the movement of creating the beloved community, right? Because if we're just going to focus on us feeling better, that is a very limited frame.
I love what you said about the affinity spaces. And it's like, before we can go and do that bridging work across these differences, we need to just get together, talk, get ready, prepare ourselves, heal in service, right? And so on the other end of that, like when we've done that bonding work and we're like, okay, we're ready to step out into the scary, world of all the divisions, like what have you in your work found are important for us to consider when we're trying to bridge those divides and to build the beloved community that can actually include us all?
John O'Donohue, who was this exquisite spiritual activist, he was like a Catholic priest who left the priesthood before he got kicked out because he was so radical. He's an Irish thought leader, wisdom person, and he says that love is the threshold where divine and human presence ebb and flow into one another. And I think the essential element of any bridging work is that it has to come from love. Right? And which is why affinity spaces are so important. And not just affinity spaces, but us doing our own healing work in service to us being able to show up as much as we can from our heart, right? Like heart, courage comes from the word of heart, right? And so, and this is in Mickey Scott Bay Jones about having courageous spaces, not safe spaces, right? So it is about crafting and creating courageous spaces that allow us to lead from trust. And and this is the other thing. I think that another essential element of us bridging, that there needs to be some anchoring relationships of trust and love that create the space that then allows people to come together. So the importance of design, intentionality, really understanding the power of convening, the power of heart-centered facilitation. Like those are skills that we develop that then, like when we think about, well, so why is it that some gatherings are profound and amazing and life-changing experiences, and other instances they're just like, oh, I had an okay time, or I had a good time. But that shift that leads to transformation is that because we have people who are skilled creating the courageous spaces that allow us and having a sense about why are we coming together, for what purpose, with what resources, with what intention, right? So understanding, I mean, I think it's fascinating to me how that convening and facilitation, I think, is often the most underestimated skill. And people's like, well, how hard could it be? It's just like gathering a bunch of people together. And it is I think it's an art, right? And the artfulness that we use in creating the spaces where people and communities can come together in love, and especially in these times, envisioning what we want, because these times of the shock and awe and fear mongering and doom scrolling requires us to create the spaces of courage and love and connection across difference, right? Because it is our coming together in beloved community, articulating what we want, not from a accumulation, I want this, but the desire. I mean, I think that it is a human need. I mean, it's what, the whole institute of other and belonging is the human, profound human desire to belong, right? And so the capacity for us to build those spaces where we can envision thriving communities, where we create the ability for people to feel that 100% of who they are belongs, right? And that operates out of love, right? And I would say understanding the hard work it is to build authentic, deep, loving relationships. Those are not easy, right? And so when we think about when there's either a conflict or difference or challenge, we have to work through that, and also knowing that we can love anybody from the appropriate distance. And sometimes the appropriate distance is like, okay, there's a season of our relationship and our connection, and that's great, and we affirm that and we move on, right? So healthy boundaries, loving, like listening, the art of conversation. How many times have we been in a relationship where and I'm just like, okay, you just want me to listen, you know, and the tolerance for narcissism and the tolerance for toxic relationships. And so we get to discern and not do that anymore, and be very, very clear about how we love appropriately that assists us in building delightful, joyful, authentic relationships and communities.
Dr. Diane, you know, I'm a soulpreneur now, and I'm on my purpose path, and I've committed, and I want to do this, and I want to be authentic in my career and all this, but I'm stuck. I don't believe in myself. There are the external narratives about who I am and where I come from, and I can't do it. There's the internal stories. Like, how have you, despite it all, continued on, and like, what can we do to nevertheless, you know, like, go for these dreams?
I think one of the ultimate challenges when we have big dreams, when we have profound commitment to impact and transformation, that there is, there is the cultural piece that says that is impossible, or you can't do that, or how dare you. It's like that amazing poem by Marion Williamson about, who are you not to be beautiful, fabulous, powerful, right? And I think I think about my own ability to recognize how essential it is to build a team, to be in community of support that tells us that we have people in our lives that tell us that we're incredible, that tell us that our dreams and our visions are worth it. And this, I think this ongoing challenge that we have is of how dare I be so bold as to imagine that I can change the world, right? And so I think what is so essential is recognizing how important it is that we have people that we trust, that we love, that can be part of the team, that can be part of the community, that shows us the truth of how brilliant we are, and how amazing we are, and how lovable we are, and how it is crucial that we don't lapse into a narrative that how dare you envision a world of equity, of belonging, of loving, of joy. Right.
And it almost sounds like, admitting to ourselves that we need support, that we need validation, that that I need that. And if you can even have vulnerability to admit that you need help, so I love what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's again, and I think it's a cultural, like a revolutionary act. Like, what is it? Audre Lorde says that self-care, is a revolutionary act, right? And when Adrienne, I love it, Adrienne Marie Brown, who's the incredible author of The Politics of Feeling Good, like pleasure activism, and she also wrote Emergent Strategy that was on every, change maker's bookshelf for years. And how they say, I believe that all organizing is science fiction, that we are shaping the future we long for and have not yet experienced. So I think that that's what we also do in our lives as soulpreneurs, that have the challenge of the distance between what the current reality is and the reality that is on the horizon that we are co-creating, but that we can't see yet, right? And how that distance is something that is often challenging for us, and yet it's one of the only things that we can do in imagining and envisioning the communities where we are profoundly creating a different world. right? And it is that piece about we have to, like when we have those meanderings and those machinations about that we are less than, we have to understand that is not true, right? And that's practice, right? That is right. The neo-linguistic programming, and I tell people, if you have had a negative narrative in your life for decades, it's going to take a while to create new pathways and new beliefs about how powerful you are, which in the spiral leads to how important it is for us to do individual healing as well as collective.
Thank you so much. The wisdom you shared, I'm so grateful that someone that I've been getting so much mentorship and guidance from for so long, I get to now share you with the people that I care about and love. So thank you for all you've had to share, and I look forward for people to continue to get to know you and the work that you do, but it's just been so amazing. Thank you.
It's been lovely. It's been really great.